I love telling powerful stories of lives that have been turned in a positive direction. And many of you know over the years that I've done a lot of work with those who have been through addiction and now entering a life that's kind of brand new, where they're healed, they're healthy, and they're able to help other people. That is the case with our featured guest today. He is from New York City. He's the Soul Cycle instructor, Noa Shaw, who has a powerful story to share. And Noa, I first of all, welcome onto the program. It's good to see you, and I cannot wait to share your story with our audience. How are you?
Well, thank you so much, Bill. I'm great. It's sort of a spring day here in New York City, and that it's over 40 degrees, so everybody's running around in t-shirts, which feels great. I'm just really honored to be here and share my words and share my hope that I can help somebody. I have a podcast called I'm Here to Help. So I'm right. We are very closely aligned that's also my mission in life, is to help other people.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. We have a lot of people that are hurting for a lot of different reasons. And during this now almost a year, as we're talking of the shutdown of the pandemic, the subject of addiction has become more and more pertinent because sadly, a lot more people are finding themselves kind of going down that rabbit hole that's going to end in disaster. And you were kind of there, right? Now, you're 14 years sober now, if I understand correctly, but there was a time when things were pretty dark for Noa Shaw, right?
Well, I mean, thank God we have some time to tell. Yes, I'm 13, coming up on 14 years sober, but I was previously sober for 15 years. So this is but I haven't had a drink since 1988. And just to sort of backtrack just a second, it's not even so much in this time and day and age, especially, is that about addiction. I mean, there's just so many people in pain because of the isolation, because of the pandemic and the changes, the unknown. There's always unknown in life, but I think people are being confronted by the great unknown of what's tomorrow going to bring, and is it going to get better? Am I going to live? Am I going to die? Am I going to get this, incurable disease? Will it kill my family members? Will I lose my job? And people to have. So there's this, for the very first time ever in the history of our planet, everybody is simultaneously experiencing pain. And I believe in energy. And when you put that much pain in the world, it's significant and it's profound, and it's a profound moment. Now, I also know that nature loves balance. So I believe in my heart of hearts that there is a better time on the other side of this. Just like myself, I've been to hell, my personal hell, multiple times. I started out very young. I started drinking and doing drugs when I was 10 years old. And that's everything across the board. And by the time I was about 24, I'd been in 10 rehabs. I'd tried to commit suicide 3 times. I'd had contracts out of my life in New York. I'd had people try to shoot me, people try to stab me. My life was basically a worthless pile of crap. I won't swear because I'll respect your show. Trying to keep it PG at most. But I was a miserable human being, and I did that all on my own. Now, I don't dismiss it this way, that I have a disease, but it's the explanation. It's my starting point to understand how I came to be that way. My actions were my actions, but I also have a disease.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
and over the years, Noa, one of the things that I've really appreciated learning, and I'm sad to learn it, but I'm glad I know it, is that for every addiction, there's some pain, there's some hurt that's trying to be numbed. There's something that you're trying to cover up. And you say that you began all of this at the age of 10. I can't even wrap my head around what would lead to that at such an early time in life. What's that backstory?
So the backstory is that we started out, lower middle income family. My father comes from the Bronx. He grew up in the tenements, and not really tenements, but it was a ghetto, but not in the current term. It was an area that was distinctly Jewish, Irish, and Italian. And So everybody was a very low means. And my father started out when he was a kid, he slept in the bathtub until there was a sister who lived and slept in the couch. He slept in the bathroom, and his other sister slept on a cot in his parents' room. When she got married, the couch sister moved to the cot and he moved to the couch. So
Got his
he slept on the
upgrade.
couch yeah, he got his upgrade. He slept on the couch all the way through high school. So that drove him, and it drove him to provide a very good life for his family. So he kept climbing the socioeconomic ladder. He was a newspaper publisher. He started in advertising in newspapers and worked up becoming a very successful newspaper publisher and president. But we moved. I did 9 schools in 12 years, and 12 years in 3 different states. So I was always the new kid. So what do you, if you're awkward and your self-esteem is low and you're always the new kid and your name is Noah, back before it was the most popular boy's name in America, when everybody would pick on you and call you Noah's Ark, and I had weird hair, and everybody else was named Mike or Richie or Scott or Bill, and I had weird hair and I had a weird name and I felt weird and I felt uncomfortable and I felt like the new kid. You want to learn how to make people like you. So when you're 10 years old and your best friend Vinny's older brothers go, "Hey, do you want to try this?" You go, "Yeah, of course," because I don't want to be seen as weak or less than. And so I just said yes. Now, I had tried drinking before that on my own, actually with my friend Vinny when I was about 9.5, almost 10 years old. My father drank wild turkey, and I snuck a bottle. We went in the woods. We drank, a quarter of it. We threw up all over the place. Vinny was like, "Never again." And I was out there the next day. And it wasn't that I was in pain, even though I was, and the pain continued for years. And what I've come to realize in retrospect is that there was a hole that I couldn't fill. There was a void in my soul, in my heart, in my being. And I kept trying everything to fill that hole. And until I found my life and my heart and a better way of living, nothing ever filled that hole. No matter how much cocaine and marijuana and alcohol or whatever drugs you had, whatever I poured in there, and it was sex and it's shoes and sneakers and it's money and it's whatever I had, it was never enough until I found a level of peace in helping other people. That's what finally filled that hole.
The journey, it takes a lot of twists and turns. I should let everybody know here at the early part of our conversation that Noah has a book. It's called Stop Thinking Thoughts That Scare You. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the program. But as we kind of lay the foundation for your story, um, I was going to ask you if the addictive tendencies started and stopped with alcohol, because that's very rare for them to start and stop there, right? Because it doesn't satisfy. It always makes you crave the next hit. By the way, folks, that's true whether it's a substance that you're addicted to or a behavior. Could be gambling, it could be pornography, it could be a whole lot of different things. It doesn't satisfy because that's not the ultimate fix for the pain. It's the numbing agent. And as the numbing agent becomes more common to you, you seek a greater intensity to it. And Noah, as you're going through all of that, even at the young age, and as it continues to escalate, what's the role of mom and dad in all of that? Are they aghast, or are they struggling with their own issues?
I had the most beautiful, and still have, thank God, knock wood, the most loving, caring parents a man or a child could ever ask for. They were amazing and supportive and wonderful and creative. And my mother's a dancer. My mother's 83 years old and still teaches dance. Before the pandemic, at 82, she was teaching 6 days a week, 2 to 3 classes a day of
I
dance
love it.
at
I love
82.
it. That's
So
awesome.
I come from a strong line of people who are just about love and kindness and protection. And they weren't aghast as much as they were so frustrated that there was nothing they could do that could help me, that it was out of their control. And I talk about this in the book. I pushed my parents, the most loving. I had the parents that during high school especially, every kid who had a bad family situation would ask, like, hey, can I stay at your house? Because it was such a loving, warm place, and there was such love and kindness being identified and modeled for them. And they would stay for months. You know, they'd come over and stay. We made room. We had extra bedrooms. My mother would be like, sure. You know, we'd have to have 4 or 5 of my high school friends sleeping and living at my house and coming and going with a set of keys. You know, it was like that sort of environment. And they were just frustrated beyond words that they couldn't help me, that I had to help myself. They didn't know that, but you know, I talk about this in the book, and I'm very open about this, and I speak about this a lot on, you know, every time on a podcast or a meeting or a group setting, that I pushed my parents to the point where I called my father one time, and there's a long backstory, but I'll save the history. I called my father and I said, Dad, I think I'm going to kill myself. And my father said, well, Noah, if that's what you got to do, that's what you have to do. And he hung up. So my father thought that him, my mother, my brother, and everybody that knew me would be in less pain if I was dead.
Wow.
That's astounding level to push people who birthed you, especially being the firstborn son.
That is staggering to think that through, and what that really means, because when someone in a family is dealing with addiction, it affects everybody. It's not just a solo enterprise here. This is everybody's doing whatever they can to try and bring about a difference. And any of us who are parents know that we would do anything to relieve pain from our children, whether it's physical pain. My son is right now dealing with a very bad back, and it's just really tough. Or whether it's emotional and addiction, that kind of thing. It's very, very powerful. Our guest here on The Big Impact is the author. I'm going to give the whole title this time. The author of the book,
Okay,
Stop Thinking. Here we go. Stop Thinking Thoughts That Scare You, a selfless help guide of practical tools to eliminate fear and anxiety and live a life of abundance. Noa Shaw is our guest. And Noa, you mentioned in the introductory comments leading into your story that your journey included not just addiction, but like threats to your life. You had a contract out on your life. I can't relate to that one. What's that all about?
Well, when you go from being one of the big, you know, I want to say the biggest, but I was a very big cocaine dealer in New York in the 70s. By the time I was 15, I was dealing cocaine in Studio 54 from 1 a.m. until 6 a.m. Then I would leave and I would go to homeroom for my freshman year of high school, you know, with $50,000 or $60,000 in my coat. And then I was also distributing large amounts of it all around the city between Miami and, you know, with the Calle cartel. It was funny. I was watching Narcos and I'm like, I know those guys.
Those guys don't mess around.
They don't mess around, but I turned into my biggest customer. And because cocaine had such a grip on me that I ended up lying and cheating and stealing a lot of cocaine on, you know, people giving it to me on a front saying, okay, we'll come get it back next week, and me just ditching and dodging and robbing Peter to pay Paul and running, and then until just everything ran out and you have no more credit, and then you're just stealing. And you know, I mean, I can give you one example. Is there was a restaurant near my home, and I was standing on the 3rd floor. There was a front entryway. It was called the Rusty Scupper Restaurant. There used to be a big chain of them. And there was the 1st floor was dining, the 2nd floor was dining, the 3rd floor was a bar. And the lobby went all the way straight up. And there was like, you know, spiral staircase, and you could look over from the 3rd floor to the 1st floor right over the hostess desk. And these 2 guys walk up to me and they said, hey, are you Noa Shaw? And I didn't recognize them. And I said, yeah, I was asking. And they grabbed me, and my back was against this metal railing, and they grabbed me and started, my legs hooked on the railing, and they started trying to throw me off the railing of the 3rd floor and kill me. And everybody's screaming at the hostess stand, and I'm hanging on for dear life. And I'm out of my mind on drugs and alcohol, but I'm hanging, screaming, help, help, help. And I don't remember who it was, but like two guys in the neighborhood came over who knew me, and they grabbed them, pulled them off, and knocked them out, and looked at me. One of them grabbed me by my lapels of my jacket. I'll never forget this moment. And he said, "Run." Sorry. Run. Just run. And I ran down the stairs. I ran out the parking lot. I jumped in my car and I drove away at 90 miles an hour. And that's just one time. I've had people come up and jump me and try and stab me. And I had a big puffy coat on, so they only made a small incision on my stomach. People try to attack me, pipes, bats, 2x4s, shot at. It's just, it goes with the territory. And I accepted it. And I speak in my book about this, is that I had a near-death experience when I was very, very young, about 4 years old. I was nearly killed by a snowplow on a hill in New Jersey. And I remember in that moment, right before I nearly died, being very calm. And ever since that, I speak about this a lot, is that I have no fear of death. And I never have. I've never, for a long time, I didn't fear death because I didn't think I was worthy of life. I didn't think that I was worth anything. So if you don't think you're worth anything, why would you fear death? You're like, please kill me. Take me out of my pain. So I would do the craziest things. When the crazy people in my neighborhood were calling me crazy, I was like, well, something's wrong. And everywhere I went, people were like, you're crazy. And I'm like, and tell me something I don't know, because my life had no worth. So it had no value. I'm still built that way. I will still jump in front of a bullet for somebody. I've run down the streets of New York and had cars going towards people and grabbed them and thrown them away. I will put my life in danger for somebody else, but it's not because I don't love myself anymore.
Are you surprised that you're still vertical?
Shocked. 3 suicide attempts in August of this year alone. And I'm sober and I'm happy. On a Sunday night, I had really bad stomach pains, but I have acid reflux. And I was like, this is no big deal. I'll take a couple, chew a couple times. I'll be fine. Monday night, same thing. I was texting my doctor during the day. I'm like, these stomach pains are weird. They're like usual. I thought it usually goes away, and it would go away with 4 Tylenol or 4 Advil and a couple of Tums, or chug some Pepto-Bismol or something. And on Tuesday night, about 10 o'clock, I text her. I was like, this pain's getting worse. I don't know what's going on. And she texts me back. She goes, okay, you look like we thought. You have a GI problem. You have an intestinal problem. Go to the hospital. And I was like, oh, which one should I go to? And I live in Brooklyn. And she said, oh, go to NYU in the city. It's the best one with specialists for GI stuff. So I said, okay, great. And I took an Uber and I went to the hospital, and they were like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm in a lot of pain from my stomach. I don't know, something's wrong with it. They were like, okay, well, let's take some blood. And I was like, they were like, 1 to 10, what's your pain? I went, it's an 11 right now. They're like, are you okay if we give you some morphine? I will really appreciate that, because I have a very high pain threshold. And they were like, well, we're going to send you back for an MRI, and we're going to see what's going on with your stomach. And when you get back, we'll plan a course of action. I was like, great. And then they wheeled me back, and they were like, sir, we took the blood. There are certain agents in your blood that tell us you're having a heart attack right now. So we're going to admit you instantly. And like 15 minutes later, I was hooked up to every machine, and they were every 3 hours waking me up, checking my blood pressure, checking my sugar levels, checking everything. Next day, I got 2 stents put in through my wrist, small operation, and I got done. And the doctor came to check on me at post-op after the anesthesia wore off. And he was like, how you feeling? I was like, good. He goes, how many days had you been feeling the stomach pain? I was like, 3 days. And he said, you had 95% closure in your arteries. We had to put 2 stents in. He goes, I don't know why you're alive. He's like, I've never seen anybody with this much blockage not have a massive, nearly fatal, if not fatal, heart attack. So I don't know. I'm here to help people. It's the only reason I know that I've lived as long as I have.
Well, and that's such an important turn in the pathway, right? You went from not wanting to be alive to wanting to help other people. What age did that transition happen? And was there an event that made you stop wanting to leave and decide that you had a purpose to be here?
I originally got sober in 1988, and I had a moment, which I talk about in the book, where I decided to get sober, and I decided this, I just had enough of being the black sheep and enough of being a loser. And what I did is I built this beautiful, amazing life for myself, and loved living in Los Angeles. I was making music videos. I was king of the hill. I was making a ton of money. I was living this beautiful lifestyle. But what I stopped doing, and I'm not anonymous. I go to AA, and I go the regularly 12-step program. And I stopped in the last year, between 14 and 15 years sober. I stopped going. And what happened is I was out in Vegas and I relapsed. I started smoking weed again, and I did that for the next 4 years. And what happened when I started smoking weed again is I went back to what I knew best when I get high, and that's drug dealing. So I opened up in New York. We have what are called weed delivery services, where you call a number and somebody about 30 or 40 minutes later comes to your door and goes like, what do you want to buy? And you can buy any kind of weed, and you can buy joints and vape pens, and you can buy cocaine that way. But I started the very first weed delivery service in Los Angeles in 2001. And I had 3,000 customers in 90 days. And again, I was making money hand over fist.
3,000 customers?
In 90 days. Yeah. Everybody was like, oh my God, word was spreading like wildfire. And after nearly 4 years of that, through a total accident, and I believe, every accident in my life is some sort of bigger power that I don't understand acting in my best defense. I got arrested, and I was facing 15 years in prison. And I got a great lawyer, and I ended up in rehab. And one of the things that the rehab made me do was go to this program called Criminals and Gang Members Anonymous, CGA. It was started by a man named Richard Mexico, who was serving a life sentence. And it dealt with not only your addiction to drugs and alcohol, which almost everybody in the gangs has, but the addiction to violence, the addiction to drug dealing, that anticipating of the drug deal. Everybody knows, if you've ever bought like a little bit of weed, that excitement. Well, imagine buying 500 pounds of weed, or 20 30 40 kilos of cocaine, like the rush from that, the adrenaline. But what they taught me in that room, what I heard somebody say, is that he was dealing with the pain that he had put in the world. And that really hit me hard, because I realized through the many years of cocaine dealing and the many years of drug dealing of any sorts, and the violence and the people I was involved with, how much pain had I brought into this world? How much did I put in? And I realized in that moment, sitting there on that couch in that rehab, that I was going to dedicate the rest of my life to helping other people. I won't even put a dent into the amount of pain that I've given out, but I can at least begin to be a force for good, and to constantly be aware of helping people. I say I believe in a God, and I pray to a God that I don't understand. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying it's not a religious thing. It's a force or a source or a power that I don't understand. And every morning and every night in my little backyard, in my chair, sitting outside, at the beginning of my day and the end of my day, I say, please let me help people. That's my prayer.
Now my background leads me directly to my faith in Christ, and knowing that is the answer to whatever questions, whatever pain that I would be experiencing. It sounds like you're taking a different path, but still trying to focus on other people, which in our culture today is a rare focus. We are so stinking narcissistic across this nation that everything is me, what about me, my truth, and everybody's making up their own stuff as they go along. And yet, Noah, if my ears are accurate, I can kind of hear in the background some younger voices. I don't think they're getting along all that well right now, but I'm hearing some younger voices.
Do you want me to close the door?
No.
I have a puppy who in a backyard, and I have a nursery school next door, but I can totally close the door.
The reason I bring that up is because when I hear younger voices, I'm reminded that we also have a responsibility to influence the next generation of those who are coming along behind us. Whether those are your children or somebody's kids at a daycare, we have that reminder as adults that we should act like adults who want to leave a legacy behind for those that come after us. So that's kind of why I led into that. Our guest here.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Our guest here on The Big Impact is Noa Shaw. He is the author of Stop Thinking Thoughts That Scare You. That book came out in early February, and you can pick it up everywhere books are found these days. Noa, by the way, talk about a fascinating story, is one of the most popular instructors for Soul Cycle, teaching sold-out classes in New York City multiple times a week. Noa, you're the first Soul Cycle instructor I've ever met. How on earth does that get on your resume?
Here's an interesting story. So as we spoke earlier, I got sober again. And right when I got sober in 2007, I got sober in September of 2007. And what was it, February of 2008, the economy crashed.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get a job. For 2 years, I couldn't get a job. I looked and I looked and I looked, and I just kept working on myself. I would go to my AA meetings and I would help people and I would sponsor people and I would work and I would do whatever I could. I would do little odd jobs if somebody needed it. And I would go to meetings. And because of the way the program is set up and the way people act, is I would go to a morning meeting, an afternoon meeting, and an evening meeting. Wow. And somebody would, 9 times out of 10, somebody would buy me breakfast, somebody would buy me lunch, and somebody would buy me dinner, because I had no money. I had change. I had pocket change. Sometimes I'd find, I'd earn $20 and I'd put, I'd buy a pack of cigarettes and put the rest in gas in my car. And eventually, after 2 years, I got a job at a rehab. I started out as the night guy and I turned into a case manager. And when you're working in this rehab, is not just drugs and alcohol. It also had, mental health and a myriad of mental health issues. So what you do is, as a worker in those situations, a lot of times, is you try to do what's called redirection. So if you're sitting inside and the person's having a really tough time, you'll be like, hey, and this was in Beverly Hills. It was it was $60,000 a month just to walk in the door. Like, these were like celebrities, A-list celebrities, world-class athletes, Fortune 500 CEOs. These were not poor people. But no matter on any socioeconomic scale, anybody, you work the same way. So I would say, like, hey, let's get up and take a walk and have a cigarette. If you're outside and they're having a bad time, you're like, let's go inside and get something to eat. You're just trying to physically move their location to break their chain of their mental cycle, to sort of interrupt it and redirect it. But that turned me into, I ended up weighing 300 pounds and smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day. Because I was eating every time they were eating. So I was eating 10, 11 meals a day, even little small things. Mm. And the more I worked, the more exhausted I became, the more I was like, oh, I'm just going to eat. And then I started getting fat. And once you start getting heavier, it becomes this, well, I'm fat. I might as well have, a triple cheeseburger with bacon and an entire basket of fries, because look at me, I mean, if I have a salad, it's not going to make any difference. I had years ago, I'd had a friend who was a Soul Cycle, who was a drug addict and alcoholic, and she lived in my backyard, and I had a guest house, but she was also a cycle instructor. And she had fallen in love with a woman who lived in New York. And I knew that if she lived and stayed in LA and continued to smoke crack and do meth, that she was going to die. So I gave her $3,000 and I gave her a plane ticket, and I said, go follow your love. And she went, and over the years, she was the first Soul Cycle instructor hired, and I was happy for her. And she had a great life, and her girlfriend was the divorcee of a billionaire, so they built this beautiful life together. And then Soul Cycle started to become a really big thing in New York, and they opened up the very first one in Hollywood, in West Hollywood. And I went to buy underwear one day. You and I have different words, but it's God. It's God, because it was a Super Bowl Monday. It was the day after the Super Bowl, and my David Beckham had these underwear ads on for H&M. This was about 9 years ago, and I had been sitting next to him when my friend was tattooing him a lot. So I got to know him. I was like, I'm going to buy new underwear. I'm going to go to H&M and buy new underwear. And I came up the escalator, and it was at the very top of the escalator. It was opening day, Soul Cycle, West Hollywood. And I walked in, I was like, hi, are the owners around? And they were like, yeah, those are the two ladies over there. I'm like, hi, I'm Noah. And they're like, oh my God, we know all about you. You're Papa, right? Because that was my nickname. That's still my nickname with some circles. And they were like, oh my God, it's so exciting. You sent Stacy. Thank you so much. Blah, blah, blah. That's so great. And they're like, are you going to ride? And I was like, I mean, a week before this, I had a doctor. My doctor looked at me, Dr. Stephen Galen in Beverly Hills. He said, at my last appointment, he said, don't worry, it's not going to hurt. And I said, oh, am I getting a shot? And he said, no, you're about to have a heart attack that's going to be so massive. You're not going to grab your arm. You're not going to grab your chest. You're going to be dead before you hit the ground. He said, I love you. It's been great working with you, great knowing you, but you're going to die. So then when they said, do you want to ride? I was like, sure. I booked a class for like 3:00. This was 12:00 because I had to go home and get changed into my 4XL t-shirt and my triple XL shorts and put on my shoes that I could only slide on and off. I was so overweight, I couldn't even put shoes on. I had step-in shoes, everything I wore. And I went back to class and I picked a bike in the front corner by a door because I realized I'm always a very considerate person, even when I'm at my worst. I'm always very considerate. I always hold doors, say yes, no, yes, sir, no, sir, thank you. And I picked that bike because it was closest to the door because when I died, I wanted them to be able to get my body out of the room quickly so I didn't inconvenience anybody. And then halfway through the class, I was just covered in sweat and I'm pulsing and I'm pounding. And this thought pops up in my mind. And I go, I've survived all of this and I'm going to die because of Egg McMuffins? And Big Macs? That's what's going to kill me? The bullets didn't kill me. The knives didn't kill me. The being thrown up, contracts out of my life didn't kill me. I'm going to die because I got fat? I was like, well, if I die, I'm going to die working hard. And I lost 100 pounds in a little over 90 days. And I became inspirational. People were calling SoulCycle being like, hey, when is Noah riding? And somebody in upper management and said, hey, have you ever thought about being an instructor? And I was like, let me get this right. 100 days ago, I was about to have a heart attack that was going to kill me. Now you're asking me to be a fitness instructor. It was the strangest transition, but through the source, through the power, everything is possible. So wherever you are, whoever's listening, whatever you think, it's not over. Never give up.
Well, and so here you are as one of the most popular SoulCycle instructors. Now, when I picture the classes, I picture a lot of folks working very hard on a seat that's so small that it would be a wedgie. So I would need what I call the big butt bike seat. But other than that, I think it would be fantastic. And I know it's a national craze. It's everywhere. And
international.
They do it virtually now too. You can do it at home, I guess. You can subscribe and connect so that you don't have to go somewhere. And with all that being now part of your life, we've also got the concepts in the book that you want people to take home. Stop thinking thoughts that scare you. So in the few moments that we have left, let's hit some of the highlights. What do you want people to know about Noah and the story in this book?
That the title says it all. It's the first words. It's a selfless help book. And what I've discovered is the most powerful thing on earth. And I'm not the first one to discover this. When I've done my research, and it's Mahatma Gandhi and Jesus and Buddha and Martin Luther King and every great thinker, philosopher, human has always said, help others. So I remember very distinctly in the 90s living in Los Angeles, walking into a Borders bookstore. Nobody will remember very few people will remember Borders books used to be everywhere in every mall. And I saw Borders bookstore and I saw a section that said self-help. And I was like, wow, self-help has really become it was a big section. Like everybody had written self-help books. And what I noticed is through the years, through my ability to be old and look back, is that generation, people look and go, the kids these days are so selfish. I'm like, yeah, they were raised by the people who were obsessed with self. So if I read a book, if I'm sitting and reading a book that's constantly focused on me and how to fix me, and that term that went around for so long, it's like, I'm looking for myself. I'm trying to find myself. I'm not trying to find myself. So this is a book that delivers the impact and lets you in very easy details and tools learn the incredible infinite power of constantly being in search of helping others and how that can alter your entire life.
One of the observations that I've gleaned over a few years here on this planet is that a lot of people struggle to realize that they can make a difference. They think they have to write a book, they have to teach a class, they have to do all these different things to make a difference, to be a positive impact on someone else. And you and I were talking off the air earlier. On the day we're talking, there's a lot of snow in my part of the world. And earlier today, my very kind retired neighbor came over. There's a good couple of feet of snow in the driveway that came last night. He came over and he asked for permission to use his snowblower on my driveway. But the more I think about that, the more mind blowing it is. A, that the guy who's 20 plus years older than me would want to do that, and B, that he would be so thoughtful as to ask if it was okay. This may shock everybody, but we did say yes. We thought that was fantastic. Everybody, Noah, has the capacity to help someone else in some way. It does, in some way, shape, or form. It could be as simple as a phone call, right? There's a little something for everybody.
I break it down to them. If you need a place, people will say, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. I break it down to the most granular situation, the easiest access. Be nice, be kind. If you normally go to the coffee place in the morning, like say hello, be kind, read the girl or guy's or person's name tag. If you go to a restaurant all the time, like whatever you do, not restaurants these days, but like if somebody's delivering your food or you're going through a checkout line or wherever you are, the more kind you are, you'll feel a power grow inside of you, and you become that. They'll look forward to seeing you next time, or you can change their entire day by being the nice person, because God knows there's enough people who are not kind, that if you are kind to the barista at Starbucks and be like, thank you so much for making my coffee, have a great day. The little most singular, like tiny granular things will have a massive impact on your life and are easily accessible and will have a great impact on other people's lives, and they'll spread that.
How hard was it to sit down and pour all of yourself out into the pages of a book? It's got to be a little bit challenging.
It only took me 25 years because of procrastination and fear. So that was just that,
Easy.
I've
otherwise,
only been waiting
really
like
easy.
half my life yet. Otherwise it was really easy. It was a total breeze.
If you had to put a time code on it from start to finish of the book, when you actually sat down at the keyboard, how long did it take?
I started last June. And I finished up about 2 months ago, final edit. Then it has to go through formatting and copy editing and things like that, then loading it to Amazon and getting approved and things like that. So about that time frame from like real conception and really beginning to do the work.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did it, ma'am. It's a pleasure to hear your story and to get to know you a little bit. Again, Noa Shaw has written Stop Thinking Thoughts That Scare You, a selfless help guide of practical tools to eliminate fear and anxiety and live a life of abundance. And by the way, for those of you who are listening to our conversation either on the radio or in podcast form, you can see the conversation as well. You can get a load of that big beard on Noah as he's in his place there in New York City. It is good to see you, my friend, and hopefully this book will touch a lot of hearts.
Well, I'd also like to add that I like to make myself accessible to people. So if I'm on Instagram, it's Noa Shaw, NOASHAW 26. And if you want to DM me, if you're having problems or you want to reach me, I like to make myself very accessible. And this was a total honor. Thank you so much, Bill, and go with God. And best of luck to everything and all you do.